Number 10. Australian UFO Site. In recent years, images of what appears to be a UFO crash site have appeared online, along with a story about how two men discovered the wreckage near the Australian town of Mount Macedon. Legend holds that the men returned hours later with some friends, only to find that the police had already cleaned up the scene. Some rumors claim that the strange-looking objects were used in the filming of the science fiction movie Knowing or the horror flick Do Not Be Afraid of the Dark, but the films were made years before the alleged discovery of the site by the two hikers. Others have suggested that the items were props from the sci-fi series Hunters. There are also people who believe that the photos are a hoax, but the plain and simple truth is that nobody has been able to prove any of the theories. Number 9. Secret Soviet Ghost Town. During the Cold War, the Soviet Union carried out top-secret research and military operations in more than 40 hidden bases and towns that were often kept a complete secret from the local population. These cities were typically built in the middle of vast forests, where their existences could be easily concealed. One such clandestine settlement, known as Skrunda 1, was located on a 100-acre property in central Latvia. It functioned primarily as a radar complex and was equipped with an early warning system for detecting incoming missiles. At its peak, Skrunda 1 was home to around 5,000 people, including Soviet military members and their families. It contained all the fixtures of a normal town, including 10 apartment buildings, schools, a gymnasium, a water tower, factories, administrative buildings, and even a theater. There were also numerous military installations, including bunkers, machine workshops, and pumping stations. After the Soviet Union fell, the Latvian government made it clear that it wanted the Russian military to leave. The two countries negotiated an agreement requiring Skrunda 1 to be completely vacant by the year 2000. The last of the residents left in 1999, leaving behind furniture, photos, toys, clothing, and other personal items which still fill the vacant buildings today, offering a glimpse into the daily lives of people who lived in a top-secret town. Like many other Cold War sites, Skrunda 1 proved too expensive for the Latvian government to rebuild or demolish, leaving its 60 buildings in a state of perpetual ruin, while authorities tried to figure out a cost-effective way to deal with it. In 2015, after repeated attempts to auction it off, the government awarded half the property to the Latvian military and announced that it would lease the other portions of the site for low rent, under the agreement that the renters develop and repurpose it. Number 8. Muchołapka. Nestled in the dense woods of southern Poland near the Czech border, there's a massive 10-sided concrete structure known as Muchołapka, or Hitler's Stonehenge. The Nazis built it during World War II when the area was considered part of Germany. Beneath the bizarre geometric monument, there's a series of underground tunnels that were built between 1943 and 1945 as part of a secret project called Riza. Researchers are unsure what the decagonal building's purpose was. Some believe that it's the unfinished base of a water cooling tower, while others speculate that it was intended as a missile launch site. Some of the more imaginative theories include the suggestion that Muchołapka was a UFO launching pad or a time travel machine. These far-flung ideas stem at least partially from conspiracy theories surrounding Hitler's death and the fact that his body was never found. For example, some people believe that Hitler didn't die in his bunker like history claims, but that he boarded a spaceship at the site and sought refuge in another dimension. While this is highly unlikely, it's just another reminder that no one truly knows what Muchołapka or the tunnels beneath it were supposed to be. Number 7. Little Pioneers Youth Camp. Europe's communist-era architecture could perhaps be best described as having a paradoxically future yet vintage look. One good example of this space-age style can be found in a collection of arrow-shaped avant-garde buildings which sit in a wooded area along Doiran Lake in North Macedonia. Known as Tito's Pioneers or the Little Pioneers Youth Camp, the boldly shaped symmetrical concrete building operated as a youth camp during Yugoslavia's communist era. It was built as part of a self-governing system of communities who are allowed to spend their money as they saw fit. The lakeside camp is just one of many publicly funded building projects that were built between 1945 and 1992 under the rule of dictator Josip Broz Tito, and it's one of 5 children's resorts that operated in Yugoslavia's Socialist Federal Republic of Macedonia. Occupying a roughly 4-square-mile area, the Little Pioneers Youth Camp welcomed children from all over Yugoslavia free of charge. At its peak, the resort employed around 300 locals. The property was abandoned in the 1990s during the Yugoslav wars. Nearby residents are said to reflect fondly upon the drab buildings, remembering their heyday as a golden era. It's easy to reach the site, but the buildings have been heavily looted and damaged and are unsafe to explore. Number 6. Tillamook Bay Naval Complex. In 1942, the U.S. Navy built a sprawling 1,600-acre base just south of Tillamook, Oregon. It contained more than 60 buildings, including large wooden hangars with enough rooms to house 6 blimps each. For several years during World War II, blimp squadrons operated out of the base, patrolling the west coast for signs of an enemy presence. But the military's presence at Tillamook Bay was short-lived. The site was all but forgotten after the war ended, and it was officially decommissioned in 1948. Since then, its buildings have been rotting away in the Oregon rainforest, where nature is quickly reclaiming the land. The former base is so well hidden that many people supposedly don't even know it exists. Only 35 of the original structures still stand, including a hangar that was listed on the National Register of Historic Places in 1989. It was built with wood due to wartime rationing and remains one of the world's largest wooden structures to this day. The hangar houses the Tillamook Air Museum, which boasts an impressive collection of World War II aircraft and other vehicles. Have you ever been to this museum? Let us know in the comments below, and hit subscribe while you're at it. Number 5. Woodpecker Radar. Between 1976 and 1989, shortwave radios around the world intercepted a strong signal that made a bizarre, unexplained noise. It sounded like the repetitive tapping of a woodpecker's beak against a tree, but nobody could figure out what it was or where it came from. The suspicion among experts that the sound was produced by an over-the-horizon radar system was confirmed after the Soviet Union fell and the world learned about the existence of 2 50-story towers in the remote Russian wilderness. Known as the Duga radar, it functioned as part of an early warning system that was designed to detect incoming missiles. The antennas, dubbed Duga 1 and Duga 2, were located in Chernobyl and Siberia. Duga 2 was positioned toward the Pacific Ocean with the purpose of detecting enemy missiles from the American west coast. Unlike conventional radar, which can only see as far as the horizon, the Duga towers were equipped with extremely strong transmitters that were capable of bouncing signals off the ionosphere and seeing over the horizon. The system was designed to alert Soviet authorities about an enemy missile within 2 to 3 minutes of one being launched. But its strong signal interfered with flight, shipping, and civilian communications, including TV broadcasts. And without knowing the source of the noise, those who were perpetually annoyed by it were powerless to make it stop. Thousands of complaints poured into authorities around the world, but they went unresolved. NATO eventually tracked the signal to the Soviet Union, which denied causing the sound. In the meantime, the radar towers remained extremely well hidden in their remote wooded locations and appeared on maps as children's recreational camps. While we know the source of the noise today, there are many lingering questions surrounding the Duga radar and how it worked. Many of these curiosities may never be answered, given Russia's continued secrecy. The system is no longer in use, but the rusting towers still stand. Number 4. Yavour 51 Bunker. Built by the Czech and Soviet militaries during the Cold War, the Yavour 51 bunker is hidden deep in the Brdy Mountains in what is now the Czech Republic. After the Soviet military took exclusive control of it in 1968, it became the most heavily guarded place in what was Czechoslovakia at the time. Guards were under orders to shoot trespassers on sight, and even the airspace above the bunker was restricted. These heavy-handed policies were implemented in an effort to keep the bunker's nuclear weapons a closely guarded secret. The stockpile of nuclear warheads and short-range missiles was put in place as part of the Warsaw Pact, which required the Soviet Union and 7 of its satellite states to prepare for a possible attack or defense strike from the Western Bloc. Equipped with its own water source, power generator, and air filtration system, the complex doubled as a safe place for the area's high-ranking Soviet military members to go in the event of a nuclear war. As Czechoslovakia's power dynamics started to shift during the late 80s, Birdie's military presence gradually decreased and Yavour 51 was ultimately abandoned. It was opened to the public for the first time in 2021 as the Atom Museum, and although the nuclear weapons are obviously no longer there, visitors can see some of the leftover tactical equipment and weapons. Researching the museum is somewhat of a challenge. A vague and somewhat cryptic set of directions on its website instructs guests to travel down a narrow forest path and to not be discouraged by driving through the deep forest. Number 3. Viaduct Petrobras. In the Brazilian state of São Paulo, there's a massive elevated road that cuts deep into the Amazon rainforest before abruptly stopping. No cars drive on it, and it's in a clear state of decay. Measuring nearly 1,000 feet long and 131 feet high, it rises up out of the jungle as a testament to an unfinished project that was put on hold for a cheaper alternative due to government misspending. Known as the Rio Santos Highway, or the Viaduct Petrobras, the crumbling highway was built during the 1960s with plans to connect it to the existing BR-101 highway. It was supposed to be completed by 1976, but in a last-minute change of plans, authorities decided to connect the BR-101 highway to a coastal highway instead. This so-called road to nowhere represents the Brazilian government's lofty ambitions at the time and the problems that many of these infrastructure projects ran into. Working conditions were reportedly torturous, and construction ground to a halt as the country descended into a major financial crisis. The highway has sat abandoned ever since. It's become a popular bungee diving site among adventurous tourists who travel to Porto Novo Salesópolis Caragua neighborhood and complete the rest of the journey on foot or by motorbike. Number 2. Prairie Observatory. Walnut Point State Park in Oakland, Illinois is home to a remote trail that leads to an overgrown, graffiti-covered dome-shaped building that clearly hasn't been used in a very long time. Known as the Prairie Observatory, it once provided astronomers from the University of Illinois with an uninterrupted view of the dark night sky, free from the light pollution of the city. Built during the 1960s, the 40-foot dome structure had an attached apartment for visiting scientists to stay in. It was abandoned in 1981 after being used for just 11 years. The telescope was relocated elsewhere, but the building itself still stands as it falls further into decay. Despite its apparent lack of upkeep, it was added to the National Register of Historic Places in 1986 and became a National Historic Landmark a few years later. Visitors are strictly forbidden from entering the observatory, but are allowed to explore it from the outside. Number 1. Vintage Train Wreck. Deep in the woods of Whistler, British Columbia, there's a scattering of old train cars that clearly met a destructive end. They can be found between the Chicamus River and some nearby train tracks where they derailed in 1956 and have sat ever since. Train derailments were relatively common during the 50s, but little was known about the so-called Whistler train wreck until recent years, according to the website Traveling Canucks. At the time the wreck occurred, the tracks were under construction. Speaking with the Whistler Insider, a local forester explained that the accident was most likely a slow derailment on a curve, which caused the cars to gently fall over. It appears as though the company decided it was easier to just move the damaged cars out of the way rather than remove them from the forest. The boxcars, which now serve as a de facto graffiti art gallery, were then simply left as they were, with some still connected and others sitting on the edge of the valley above the river. There was no local newspaper at the time, so much of the local population remained unaware that a crash had even happened. Although the site was once off limits to the public, it's now part of a popular hiking trail and is open to exploration at one's own risk. Thanks for watching. Have you ever found something strange in the woods? Tell us about it in the comments below and hit that subscribe button while you're at it.